Barbara Mandrell.
Oh, please release me, let me go.
This is AndyTube. In this video, I'm going to show you the troubleshooting process I went through to find out why this needle thread tension unit assembly wasn't working properly. You know, when you lift up the presser foot by raising the lever in the back there, it's supposed to release tension on the tension disc here. So your thread, needle thread, has no tension. So when you thread your needle, you lift that up so you can get the thread in between the tension disc. And when you put it down, you have tension on the thread, and you sew. When you want to remove your fabric, you know, you lift up the presser foot so you can move the fabric, but that also releases tension on the disc so that when you pull your fabric out, the thread can easily come with it. Okay, so you know, I got this machine cleaned up here and I've been restoring it, and I realized, hey, nothing's going on here with this tension. Okay, so I know from experience with these type of plastic dials on there that the little plastic can break or crack. So that's the first thing that I would look at. If you look in the description below the video, I will put the starting times for the different things that I'm going to be going through. And that's going to involve removing and replacing the needle thread tension unit. It's going to be removing and replacing the presser bar and the pressure system for the presser bar. It's going to be removing part of this of the needle bar rocker bracket assembly. That's what the needle bar swings on. They call it rock. We would call it zigzag. You know. But I'm going to show you how to remove part of that, and then I'll put it back, and then the presser bar lifter and the tension releasing lever back behind all this. And that's why we have to remove all this stuff up front. So I'll put the times in the description below, so you can skip ahead to it or go back, or you can come back some other time and you know, and see where that starts. Okay, so like I was saying, the first thing I suspect when this is a plastic indicator dial back here is that the dial breaks. If you've seen some of my other videos, you've seen me replace that and so forth. So to get in there and look at this, I'm going to have to take off the tension assembly here, the tension unit. There's a little set screw in the metal knurled knob. Look around here, we can find it. So we'll give that a turn or two to loosen it. We'll take that off. Turn it, you can see the little set screw right there. Okay. And then the numerated dial. And this tension adjustment flange, threaded inside and out. The stop washer. And it stops the spring from popping off. And then we've got the tension spring that when the foot is down, this spring pushes back on the indicator dial to squeeze the tension discs together, and that's what puts tension on your thread. And this is the culprit I want to see. But you see that center bar in the hole? That's what can break, and that's what I thought the possibility was, that that little plastic piece had broken out because the tension releasing pin, you go back to the lever, the pressure bar lifter lever, back there, we lift that up to raise the pressure bar. There's a lever inside, pushes on a tension release pin that pushes on that bar in the center, which pushes against the spring, which makes this loose on the thread. But it's not broken or cracked. You look at it close, sometimes you'll see a little crack. It looks okay, but when the pin pushes on it, the pin just goes right through the crack. But this one looks good. This is the original one. It still looks good. So if I take off the thread guide here, this little assembly, it's got the thread guard, the thread, and then it's got the check spring or thread tension spring, and then it's got the 3 tension discs. And on this model there's 3 tension discs because you can twin needle sew. So you can sew with 2 needle threads and 2 needles. So you need 3 discs, you know, to separate the threads for tension. Now, let's see if I can turn this a little bit. Here we go. What I'm looking for now is the tension pin gone. In this slot right here is a little pin, like a little nail, that the releasing lever pushes that pin forward, and I see the pin there. I don't think you will. Maybe you can see that darker part right there. That's the tension releasing pin, and if I put my little screwdriver in here, when I raise this up, it should be pushing my screwdriver forward, and it's not. So I see the pin is here. Oh look here, I can just see if I can scrape it out here. It's got a little flange. If you've never seen these, it's got a little flange on one end. Come on out of there. It's kind of sticky. Sometimes my magnet can pull those out. So I'll take a look at this pin and see if it looks normal, the length and stuff. Depending on the Singer models I've had, they're like from 1 inch to about 1 1/4, maybe a little longer. And this looks like the original factory pin. Just flat on the back side that the lever will push against, and this front side is kind of crimped and flanged, but it looks normal. So far I haven't seen what's the cause of the problem here. Why isn't this pushing against that pin to make this thread unit work normal? So I've got to come and work here now, because this is the other part of that. And here's the pressure bar lifter lever, you know, just pushes on the pressure bar guide bracket. That's what the pressure bar is. Let's back up a little bit here. That's what the pressure bar is clamped to with this set screw. And then it's called the guide. It slides up and down in this slot. So when you lift that lever, right, one of the things it does is push on that guide, and that's what raises or lowers the pressure bar. And here's the tension spring for the pressure system to keep the bar pushed down. And the other thing that this lever will do is on the back side of it is like a pin or a bump that hits a little kind of rocking lever back here that's supposed to push on that pin. And it's too dark in here. I can't see if the lever's there, or sometimes that little pin on the back of this will be worn off, and you know, there's nothing left to lift the little tension release lever in there like that. So I've got to take a look at this and get in there. It looks tempting, you know. It looks like, see if I get a little light here. It looks like right in here is the screw that holds that lever on, but when you start to unscrew it, it just hits the pressure bar. So that's why I've got to take off the pressure bar system to be able to take that screw out and take the lever out and look at the back of it and see what kind of conditions it's in. So that's what I'm going to do now, is remove this pressure bar system. So to remove this, there's a couple different ways to go about it, and there's probably more than that. And just remember, all the stuff that I do on my channel, it's what I do. You know, some of it is the way Singer shows and some of their manuals. Some of it I've just learned on my own. Sometimes old sewing machine guy has told me, hey, here's a better way to do it, and so forth. But the way I start on this particular model is to take off this numerated dial and grab a screwdriver here, and it's just a screw right in the front there, a little short screw, and it's lefty loosey. It screws into a little bracket behind it, and get that off and get it out of the way, because it's there we go. It kind of has to go on a bracket behind here, and to get these two pieces separated, it's easier for me if I take this off. And it just screws right on, you know. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is, let's see, I'm going to go up here on the top, up here. Let's see if I can tilt this a little easier. Oops. Sorry about that. And I'm going to take out this screw right here. Okay, right there. I just wanted to show you that. It's called this is the regulating bracket. This is the regulating bracket screw. So this holds the bracket on this screw, but it also is hollow, and the guide pin goes up into it. So that's why we're going to start taking it apart, like so. Okay. And then this is where you want to be a little bit careful and you don't bend the guide pin. That's why I take the dial off, so I can see this part better. Because this little sliding bracket up here won't go up or down. It's got to come out, but it's on a guide pin, and the guide pin goes through the spring and down and rests on the top of the pressure bar. So I actually go down here and I loosen this set screw in the guide bracket down here so that I can lower this stuff and make it easier to get out. Okay, there we go. So I can push down and get that bracket down, get the pressure bar down, and now it's like hitting the feed dog down here, right? And then I've got a little space to work with up here. I wonder if I can get that bracket off. I'll have to show you this when I do get it off, because it's kind of a pain, this dial system. I like the old big old thumb nut up there myself. So yeah, I'll show you that once I got it off. I think that'll be easier. So what I know from experience is don't try and pull this around the top, because you'll bend the pin. So by lowering the pressure bar, you've created a little space up here. Okay, and you can push up the spring and get a plier in there below the spring and onto the guide pin, right? And then you can guide the pin up through that, up through the bracket, or even easier, grab it up here at the top. Yeah, that might be easier. Get it up through the top here and get that pushed up right out the hole in the top. That little bracket's gonna fall off. So there's the guide pin. It's just a steel pin, but it bends pretty easy, I found out. This is the little guide bracket for the retaining bracket, and this is the part I want to show you about. That this little bent piece of steel at the end has to be turned to go in this keyhole slot. Going to go on sideways, then it slides up and down. So that's why I took off the dial, because it's easier when this is on the machine. It's easier to turn that, put it in the keyhole, and then turn it so that it will slide up and down. Now I'll show you when I go back together, but it's kind of tricky the first time you're trying to take it off, because this part will be on the pin, the guide pin, right? But it'll be stuck through here like that, you know, so it slides up and down. Let me get it back in there. I keep pulling it out. See, when it's not on, when it's not attached, it's easy to do. But that's how it goes up and down like this, right? So you have to get it up to the top of the keyhole and turn it so that little bent piece of metal right here can be wiggled out the keyhole. And that's how you separate it. I'll show you again when we put it back together. Now I've got my little the tension spring part in here. Okay, that'll just come out now. And so everything is loose up here at the top now, right? I mean, let's see, can I get this over here better? Everything is loose out of the top. So I can now start sliding up the pressure bar through this guide bracket and pull it up and bring it up Get my little plier if I need to, and you can bring it right out of the top of that same hole you took the guide pin out of. So there's the pressure bar. And then this is the guide bracket. Without the pressure bar in it, you can let's see how they do that before. I think if you lower the needle bar to get the connecting needle bar connector out of the way, then you can slide this out of that slot like that. So that's the guide bracket, and that's the set screw in the front of it here. It's all solid steel. So now let's lower this back down here. Now look, I can take the pressure bar lifter lever. I can remove that screw and pull it out and take a look at the condition of that. And let's do that next. Okay, now, and by the way, now with some of that stuff out, I can see the one end of the tension releasing lever. See how I can rock it up? That's what's supposed to happen when you lift this lever. This arm is supposed to rock with it, and the other end over here, behind here, pushes on that pin for the tension unit. And I see it's lifting up here. It looks like it's lifting. See it? So I don't know what's going on. Let's go ahead and just keep going. And we'll take out this pressure bar lifter lever hinge screw, called the hinge screw because the threads don't go all the way to the head. I'll show you when I get it out. Under the head there's a smooth area so that lever can hinge up and down on it. Right? You don't want the lever sitting on threads. Come on, you. It's longer than you think, huh? Okay, looks like it's about ready to fall out of there now. So let me hold on to the lever and stick my little magnet stick there. Okay. I'll leave the lever in there for a minute so you can see this hinge screw. So it's a screw because it has threads versus a pin, which would be smooth. And it's a hinge because it has this flat area under the head for the pin to go up and down on. Right? And then here is the lever. This comes out of that same slot that the pressure bar guide slid up and down in. Remember that? So we'll see if you can watch as I put the screw in there, and you see that the lever goes up on that smooth hinge part so it can kind of swivel and hinge on there. Right? Okay. Hinge screw. And then on the back, here's that little pin, our raised area I mentioned earlier, and that is what is supposed to lift up the tension release lever. And this, I've seen this just worn right off. You know, on some of the older machines back from the 20s and 30s and stuff that I did. Even from the 50s, even some of the slants that got a lot of use. So when you lift it, it will still do the pressure bar thing, but it's not, that pin isn't there to move the release lever. So far this is okay. right? Looks normal to me. Haven't really found the problem of not releasing the tension. So to see where this tension release lever, it's screwed into the body back behind this whole you know, vibrating. Sometimes they call it vibrating bracket. This time they call it the needle bar rocker bracket. Okay, but it's kind of back in there. Now, the old guy that taught me about this and talked to me about it, he had me taking out this whole bracket, which includes this little screw. If you saw me center the needle video, oh man, what a pain that thing is over here. But I don't do that. I'm going to show you how to disassemble just part of this so that this will swing out. And you can do it on this model because the bracket assembly has the bushing for the needle bar. See, there's the bottom needle bar bushing right there. It's built on. It swings with the needle. If you look at some of the slant needles and stuff, that bushing is built right into the body, and you can't move anything like this. Everything has to go up and out. But with this, when I show you how to take out this hinge pin, you can just swing this out of your way. And if we're lucky, we can get to the stuff in the back to see what's going on. So that's what's going to be next, is going to be removing part of the needle bar bracket assembly and swinging it out of our way. Okay, so this part, I don't know if you can see it, it's kind of in, where's my weird little pointer stick here. This part of the bracket, see it here, comes down like that and goes here and here. That's the main bracket. And the rest of this stuff is what you'd call the assembly, where it attaches to the needle bar driving arm here and bolts into this clamp kinda. Then it's got the spring unit that makes it spring back and forth, and up through this whole part over here is like an eccentric hinge stud. Big old hinge stud that goes up in there like that. And that's not that hard to take out. You know, if you want to take it out, there's a set screw here, and there's a set screw here, and you loosen this one, and then you can go onto the bottom and just turn it and take out this stud, hinge stud all the way. The problem is the position of that eccentric hinge stud is what positions the needle bar front to back, you know, into the needle plate. If you saw any videos I did of that. So it's kind of a hassle, you know, just to go back and look. So what I'm going to do is just loosen this set screw, and that is a set screw. It's a little dinky guy. I had to dig out some different old screwdriver set to get in there. It's a little dinky guy. And then this is a hinge stud. Okay, and that's how the needle bar driving arm and the bracket connects to the rocker and makes the actual needle bar swing. So if we go into this little dinky, it wants to go back, so I'll hold it here and give that 2 or 3 good turns. You don't have to take it out. And then sometimes you can pick this up. It might be stuck in there with a lot of varnished oil and old dirt and stuff like that. So if you want to gently with a pair of pliers kind of rock it a little bit and try and pull it up. Let's see if I have it up a little, if I can get a screwdriver under the edge of it. There it goes. Now you see it coming up here now. Whoop. Whoop. Get another screwdriver under there. Just, you know, never force anything. I'm being real gentle here, just kind of wiggling that up to get this hinge pin. Come on out of there. There we go. Whoa! So I'll show you that. Okay, so here's the head. Here's the hinge part, right, for the bracket. And it's a pin because it's smooth. Remember the other one was a hinge screw because it had threads. This is a hinge pin because it's smooth. But it's the same thing. This rocker has to kind of, you know, hinge back and forth there. Okay, but you see what we did now. Here's the needle bar driving arm and the bracket attachment for that going to here. So let me get this at an angle. We should be able to swing this. Come on out of there. Oh, it doesn't want to come out. I forgot the connecting link is too long on this. I can't swing from the thread take-up lever, the needle bar clamp here that makes the needle bar go up and down has a connecting stud that goes into there. And the last machine I did was easy enough to swing out. This one is not, my mistake. So see, it won't quite come out, and the screw is way down in there, so it's not going to work. So let me get the screwdriver to fit this, and we'll have to take out the needle bar. Dang, what a bummer, huh? Okay, so to take out the needle bar, I'm going to have to remove the needle clamp here on the end of the bar, because the bar is going to have to come right up. And that's just a screw here. The screw goes through a little wire type thread guide and through the needle clamp and right into the needle bar. So when you take this little screw out, watch out for that little wire guide wants to come off. Sometimes with it, sometimes flying off. Here, this time it kind of stayed on there. Okay. So the screw goes right through that loop, like so. And then that goes into the needle clamp, which goes into the needle bar. And then I'll loosen the thumb screw here, and we should be able to slide this clamp on you. Slide the clamp right off the bottom of the needle bar. There we go. There we go. Of course, if you haven't cleaned and degreased your machine yet or anything, that's going to be real bad chances. So you might have to clean it and loosen it as you go. Now, if we loosen the clamping screw that's against the needle bar, we should be able to slide that needle bar right up through the bottom bushing, through the top bushing, and through the connecting link, and just right up out of everything. Tight fit, huh? Hey, come on, you. There we go. So here's my needle bar out of there. And I'm going to pull that needle bar connecting link out to show you. Yeah, see, this is a pretty long one. A lot of them are not this long, and when you take this out, you can swing this forward and it'll pull that connecting link right out and just leave the needle bar attached to all this. But on this 457, it's pretty long, so it couldn't get the angle to come out. So that's why we had to take out the needle bar and the needle bar connecting link, which links to the take-up lever system, right? So it makes takes up your thread and makes the needle bar go up and down. Okay. But now with that out of there, you can see how you can swing this forward. Now we're going to go in and take a look at the tension releasing lever and see what is going on. Okay, now we can have a better access to the tension releasing lever, and down here in the corner is the hinge screw that holds that lever in. Let's see if I can get this in a better position here to see. Hard getting light back in there. Let me take a picture of this and give you a slide of how that looks in there. Okay, I changed some lighting here too, so this may give you a better view. So the tension releasing lever comes up here and curls up, and this edge of it is made to ride on that pin of the pressure bar lifting lever. So when it's in here and lifts up on its hinge screw, see, it's supposed to lift this up and hinge on its own screw here, and this raised bar here is designed to push on the tension releasing pin that I showed you going through the tension stud, and push that pin back so the spring tension is released and you have some looseness between the tension discs. And this one is not rocking. It's very stiff, and it's not traveling the distance to push the pin back. So that's why even before I was raising this lever and I was getting some resistance, but it wasn't opening the tension here or moving that pin. Now there's a couple things that I have found can cause this. One, if the hinge screw here is all gunked up and frozen from old dried oil over the years. You know, people oil their needle bar and they oil this stuff up here, the take-up lever and so forth, and they often, or usually, do not go back and mop up the excess oil. And this low spot down here is one of the places it can settle. And especially when they don't use pure sewing machine oil, when they use household oil or 3-in-1 that has a lot of different additives to it that really get hard when it dries. And it's not uncommon that when the machine has sat for years and somebody gets it and they can't lift this lever. It's very hard. And that can be because this hinge screw is all gunked up, and also the pressure bar bushing. The pressure bar can be stuck in there with old dried up oil. But they really they push and push and push on this, and this is a strong piece of metal, and its strength is a lot stronger than this tension releasing pin. So they can either snap off this little post that sticks out, they can bend this tension releasing pin out of shape, which I've seen a few times, and so forth. So let's see, the other thing is, if this hinge screw for the release lever has worked loose over the years. Now I've seen that too. And then the release lever itself can slip a little bit off of the hinge part and get onto the threads of the screw, and this can get bound up in here, not because of old dried up oil, but because of a loose screw. And the same thing, somebody forces it, and this just starts bending and twisting. So we want to take this out, and we want to look at this tension releasing lever and see more exactly what is going on with it. Okay, so let me get my Chapman screwdriver and get a bit on there, and we'll take that out and see. Okay, so let's go in here and get this screw out. Oh, that's kind of loose. Yeah, okay. Let's get this out. You can see by swinging this out how it just gave me barely enough access. Now the Singer prescribed method was to leave the needle bar in this bracket and take this whole assembly off over here. But I don't like to do that, because then you have to reset the distance of the needle bar to the hook, and I find it easier to take out the needle bar and just reset the height of the needle bar, But some people leave the needle bar in here and take all this big old hinge stud and everything out of this side and put it back in and just center the needle back in the hole of the needle plate and be done with it. Oop. Okay, so here is the hinge screw. Looks to be in pretty good shape here. Let's see if we can get this out now. It's kind of, there we go. It's wedged in there a little bit. So let's take a look at it. This is the return spring on it that pushes against the body of the machine to keep the what I call the pin release arm up here away from the pin. And then when you lift the pressure bar handle, it's supposed to rock over like that, and this part right up here push against the pin. And then when you lower the pressure bar, this return spring makes its hinge back away from the tension releasing pin. Now this, yeah, this looks a little deformed here. I can see how this is. I'm hoping you can see. This is coming, and as it comes up here, it's curving back a little. It should be a real nice 90-degree. And this arm that goes up to rest on the lifting lever, see, it would kind of be like that. Would sit like that in the machine. I can see that this arm has been bent there. So there's a bend here and kind of a twist to it, and there's a little bend and twist down here. So that I've seen this before a couple times where it's been forced when either everything was all stuck, or like I said, the screw was a little loose, and I'll show you what I mean by that. But also, this end seems pushed up, the tail on it. Now it always has a little flip at the end like this, but the whole thing, look, the angle of it doesn't look right. Yeah, so this is damaged. Now, somebody who's good with working with this kind of stuff could probably take, you know, their anvil and some good pliers and kind of reshape this back to how it's supposed to be and get it to work. And I'm sure there's people watching this that will do that. And I think the first one I ever encountered, I did that. I had to play around with it quite a bit. But I'm going to look to see if I can find the replacement part for this one, because I'm going to sell this machine to somebody, and I don't want to knowingly say, yeah, this part was all bent out of shape, but I bent it back, you know, and stuff like that. So if I can get a good clean part, it should be not too expensive, under $10, you know, and then just replace it, and then it'll be good. And I'll hang on to this for future use in case of emergency. I'll have a part number on here. See if I can, and I got my glasses on, but I'll look at the part number and search for it. And when I come back, I'll either have the replacement or I'll have a bunch of pliers and we'll try and straighten this one out. But maybe I'll take another picture back in here to show you what it looks like with everything out now. So I'll be back someday with the rest of the video here. Okay, 4 days later, I have my new tension releasing lever. This is the old bent one here that's twisted and bent here and here and here. And this is my new one that I bought off a seller on Bonanza who I've used a few times. And he happened to have this part number. And the part number, by the way, is 179624. And that's why I like to search for parts by part number, because of course I'm working on a Singer model 457K, but I found the part from a machine that was being parted out that is a Singer 329K, but it's the exact same part and part number. So I was able to get this. Maybe I'll put a link down below to that seller's page at Bonanza, because I see now he's got like 3,400 vintage sewing machine parts with other brands besides Singer. But this one is in really good condition, so I'm going to swap it out and replace this bent one, and then I'll hang on to this in case I need it in the future. But while I set the machine up to get this installed, I'm going to show you a couple slides of the two, comparing the front and back sides of the old bent one and the new replacement. Okay, maybe we can give it a go from this angle. So, you saw the picture. I hope you could see how the other one was damaged. And like I said, I'm sure there's plenty of you that could attack that with some pliers and so forth, and maybe get it straightened out enough to work. I'm just going to put a drop of oil where that hinge screw goes. I get a little lubrication. What I wanted to mention about installing the new one was the seller sent along to me the hinge screw for the release lever that he sent me, and I really like that, because there's nothing wrong with the original screw, and the new screw is a tad bit shorter, but I'm not worried about that. The threads are correct, but to me, on these metal parts, they form a wear pattern. And you know, it's like if I change the hook, I like to get the original bobbin case. So if I change a part like this that has a bolt or a screw, I like to use the one that came with it. And what I was talking about before was, when you install this, or if the screw gets loose, it's easy to get the lever stuck on the thread like that, and not up on the hinge part of the hinge screw. It's got to be up like that, flat to the head of the hinge screw. And now see on this side, let me turn it over, see on this side it's not flat, and that's what messes this lever up. So when it goes in, it has to be, the head of the screw has to be flat all the way around against the lever. That way the lever's completely on the hinge, and it will work very easily, just like that. And that's what we want. So the way I do that is I position the lever, then I get the screw started, and once the screw will kind of stay in the machine, I put my finger behind the lever and push it towards the head of the screw while I finish screwing it in, to make sure that it gets flat and level all the way around. So let's see if I can do what I just said here. And this spring is just going to go up here on the side of the body. And it's going to go right below where the tension pin comes out. So I got the tension pin, and I'm going to put it back in here. Where's my little screwdriver? I want to push it back in there. Oops. Oh, here it is. I used the little screwdriver to push it back in there. Come on, you. Get it started in the hole and push it all the way back in there. And when it is, I'm not sure it's going to show on my camera, but the tension pin will stick out about a 1/16 of an inch, or maybe more than that. It'll stick out the back of the tension stud there. Okay, and then this is where the tension pin matches up, kind of like right like that. So the spring, when you put it in, is going to go below where that tension pin is, and you're going to line up the hole of the lever with the hole for the screw. So you can kind of get it in there and maneuver it around till it's mostly in place. Let me move this up a little bit out of the way. And matter of fact, I'm going to push that tension pin back a little bit. But make sure that that little pushback spring is not bent like that, because then the spring action won't work. Okay? Yeah, so that's pretty good. See if I can get the hole lined up together here a little bit better. I'll have to start the screw to do that, I think. Okay, so I'll get my spring screwdriver here and get this spring started in here. See if I can work around the camera a little bit. You're going to have to push the lever over so the hole lines up a little bit better. You're working at a little bit of an angle with your screwdriver here, so you want to be sure that you get the screw in straight. You can't let the screwdriver go, the screw go in at an angle. Your screwdriver can be, but not the screw. Okay, now that's going in well. So I've got the screw about halfway in now. So this is where I stick my finger back behind that lever and bring it up forward against the screw, and then start tightening the screw the rest of the way in. Trying to keep that lever flush to the screw, and it's very easy for it to get caught on the lip of the hinge part, or to get caught on the thread. It's real easy for that to happen, because you turn the screw all the way in, because it has a hinge part, so you don't leave the screw loose. It doesn't want to get up here on the hinge. I can tell it's not flat up on the hinge. It's one of these fiddly little things you got to get just right. And it's usually not as hard as I make it look on camera, because you're usually not working around the camera. There. Now that feels pretty good, but I've got my spring is bent over here. The spring is going like that against the side of the wall. So I'm going to have to loosen it, darn it, and rock it back and try and gently push that spring back and over against the side of the body. Shoot, it really doesn't want to cooperate. doing it this way. Darn thing. Imagine that. Because you don't want to damage the spring or anything, right? There. Okay, so I pushed the top of that piece back a little bit so it was up straight, and I pulled it, rocked it left, and then gently nudged the spring, and the spring went right into place. So now it's straight against the side. My lever's straight up, so I'm going to try and tighten this again and see if I can get it up there. Now that looks pretty good and flush all around the screw. So to test it, I'm just gently going to lift up this end of it the way the lifting lever would. Oh, and look, there we go. So it's rocking. I mean, this little spring is stiffer than you think, but it's not being hindered by the hinge screw or anything like that. And I've got the hinge screw tight, and this does rock just right. And you see it doesn't rock very much, right? Okay, so let me go. I want to test it a little bit. So I'm going to take my little screwdriver and push it in all the way back against that tension release pin. Then I'm going to look in here and see. Can I lower this a little bit? And see. Yeah, it's just dark in there, isn't it? And let's see. See if I can see the tension pin coming out the end of the stud, and is my lever lined up with it? And it is perfect. I see about 1/16 of an inch of the stud sticking out, and it's resting right up against the lever. Now let me rock the lever. Good. It pushes that pin in. Okay. Let me move this back around, and I'll show you how then I test the alignment to make sure that I've got it properly. Is I'm going to put my screwdriver in there up against the flanged end of that pin, and then when I lift this lever, I want to see and feel it move that screwdriver back about 1/16 of an inch. Whoop. Whoop. Can you see it moving that screwdriver? I feel it and I see it, but I don't know how well it shows up on camera. Because the spring part in the tension will push back against it, right? Remember this little beehive spring? It'll be pushing back against it. So that's what'll do that. But this is working good. When I move that little lever, it moves the tension pin and my screwdriver. Oop. I wish you could see that a little bit better, but when we put the tension unit back on, I think you will see that. So I am successful after all of this replacing the damaged tension releasing lever back here. So I think the next thing I'll do is rebuild the tension and put it back, and then I will put in the pressure bar lifter, and we'll actually test the function on the tension unit, because that's what started this whole thing. And then once I accomplish that, I can start putting back the needle bar and the presser bar and setting the heights and showing you how to do that, okay? As part of reinstalling the needle thread tension unit, I need to reinstall the presser bar lifter lever because it has the dual function, besides lifting the presser bar, of moving the tension pin releasing lever to push this tension releasing pin that's inside the tension unit. So that's the first thing that I want to do. I could reassemble the unit, but I wouldn't be able to test its functionality without that lever in place. So let's just go ahead and put it in real quick. I'm just going to put a little drop of oil in the screw hole there for it. And this lever is held in place by the presser bar lifter lever hinge screw. It's a very easy reassembly here. The lifter lever goes through a slot that's in the side of the nose there, and we just line it up with that screw hole and we'll put the screw in. Because it's a hinge screw, as I mentioned before, it will install all the way in our dead head because it has that hinging area underneath the head or below the head that allows the lever to hinge on it. Nice and firm because it gets a lot of action there. Yeah. So when you lift this up, as I said, one of the functions is it will move this tension releasing lever to release the pin. Okay, so we can, let me rearrange this here and then we can get on with reinstalling the tension unit and zeroing it out. The first thing we need to make sure is that our tension releasing pin is installed in the tension stud and pushed all the way to the back. And remember, the little flanged end is towards you, towards the front of the machine. Now I know a lot of the older, maybe 15, Model 15, 66, maybe the 99, I don't remember now, but they may not have a flanged end. They may just be kind of flat or rounded on each end of the pin. And I just use my little tension screwdriver to push that to the back. Right? Now that I have the lever and the pin and everything in there, I'm just going to give it a quick test to make sure that my installation of all the inner parts here is okay. See if it moves my tension, it moves my screwdriver out. Yep, and there it is. It doesn't need to move very much. It's just like a little 32nd or 16th of an inch. The idea is to separate the tension discs in this unit, and you know your thread isn't very thick so you don't need much space between the discs, so it just has to move a little bit. The next thing we're going to do is make an assembly of parts here that go on that consists of this thread take-up spring. Also, it's commonly called the check spring. And we're also going to use the thread take-up spring thread guard. And just like it says, it's to guard the thread from going behind there and getting tangled up in the spring. And then we need our tension disc, and as I mentioned before, in this case we have 3 of them because we can twin needle sew. And this type of flat Singer tension disc, it doesn't matter which way you put it. The ones that are curved you have to assemble, you know, with the inner curves together to be able to pinch the thread. But with these flat ones, both sides have this smooth flat area to put tension on the thread. So if we take our little stack of those and we put them in the thread guard, then we're going to wrap this spring around it with the coil in the back towards the machine and the little, I guess we call it a single coil, in the front. Okay. On your spring here in the back, there's going to be a little tail. The last coil is turned in and there's a little stubby tail. And that tail has to go into one of the spaces in what I call the tension gear. And that's what allows the spring to have tension, stops the spring from turning as the thread pulls up on this check spring. So when you assemble it, the post on the thread guard has to go in this hole up above, and you want the kind of the loop of the spring to be hanging straight down towards the floor, towards the bottom. So just slip that over the test stud, the spring, get it started, and then work the tension disc and the thread guard up onto the stud. Make sure that your last little coil here, well, it's kind of bright. Let's see if I can move something here. Turn this a little. Make sure the last little coil goes around that stud, and don't get it caught in the slot of the stud. Then the tension or the thread guard post has to be up to go in the hole, and that little tail has to go between a slot in the gear so that the loop hangs straight down like this. Okay? And that's how you control how much tension is on this spring. If you start with the loop way over here, you're going to have to put a lot of tension on that coil to get it up here on the stop. If you start with the coil very close to the stop, you won't have enough check tension when you're sewing. So the best place to start is with that hanging straight down. Now once you get those 5 pieces on there, just hold it in place and move that check spring or thread check spring up and rest it on the stop right there. And now you're going to have, see that? You've got tension on there. That's very good. That's what you need right there. Our next part to put on is called the tension indicator, better known as the plus minus dial. And you see that little bar in the center of the hole, so you want to go with your indicators up so you can see them and slide that into the slot on the post and push it all the way back. And next you actually have your tension unit spring, also called the pyramid spring and also called the beehive spring. And you see the last little coil on the small end is like a half a coil. And people call this the teacup, and they call it the boat. And there's a little bit of controversy about whether that goes down or up. And I always think of it like the teacup or boat going down. And I've kind of tested it both ways, and I don't see a difference on any of the tension unit functions of any of the machines I've done. So I'm just in the habit of putting it down. And it's a little half coil, so that that 90-degree bend there goes in the slot. And that keeps this tension spring from turning. Okay. The next part is this. Now, the full name for that is the tension indicator flange stop washer. Most will just call it the stop washer. Some call it the spring washer. Okay, but you see the little finger sticking up, and that goes up. That goes up when you put it on. This finger is what I'm going to call flat. As it goes up, it doesn't bend in either direction. It just goes straight up. But some of these tension units, the finger is bent. And if there is a bend in the finger, you want it to point towards you, towards the front of the machine. This one, it doesn't matter because it's straight, and we can put it on either way. And it just, same thing, it just slides into that slotted tension post with the finger pointing up. We'll put on the tension indicator flange adapter. Of course, you see the flange on the one end there. This piece is interesting to me because it's threaded on the inside so it can screw onto the tension stud. And it's got threads on the outside circumference so that you can screw on the adjusting thumb nut, or the retaining thumb nut, or the tension unit thumb nut. And this is an aluminum, or I think this part maybe is steel. But the post is usually aluminum. So just be real careful. If this slot gets spread or pinched over the years, this can be easy to strip when you put it on. So just please take your time. I usually turn it backwards a little till I feel it sit, and then go forward. Now it's kind of firm when you screw it on because you're pushing against the tension spring back there, right? Okay, so we'll put it up there until I feel the tension discs firmly together. That's a good place to start. Then I want to do one more test of my new tension releasing lever and tension pin assembly. When I lift this up, I expect to see this indicator move forward against that spring to release the tension back here. These are very tightly together now. Yeah, see when I lift that up, do you see that move forward a little bit? And when it's up, it's releasing tension. And now my tension discs are loose. Yay, hey. Ta-da-da. Okay, so let me get some thread here and we'll zero this tension unit out. Okay, Now I don't have my arm cover and the spool pins and everything on here, so I just stuck a barbecue stick in a hole and put a small spool of thread on here. That's all. I just need something to hold the thread. So I want to get the thread in the tension disc now, so I'm going to raise my pressure bar lifter, which releases the tension. And I'm going to just hold my thread and run my thread between the tension discs and lift up that spring and click the thread over the little positioning finger on the thread guard and bring it towards me. Okay, so I'm now under that check spring, and I have the thread in front of the position finger towards me. Now the idea is then I'm gonna put my pressure bar lifter down to put tension on the disc and the thread, which I have now. I have tension. Okay. Then I'll just pull off some slack of this thread up here and lay it up over the machine. You could actually just put the thread through the disc like a shoe shine, and if you wanted. But the idea here, to zero it out, you can test it for gram weight and so forth, which I've done in my other videos. But in general, you want to have a tension so when it's set to 0, it has very little drag on the thread, and this has quite a bit. You see it bring up that check spring, and I've got to pull it. I got to pull it pretty tight, so I'm going to loosen this a little bit. That's easier, but it's still hard. Oh, now it's getting real easy, and that's what I want. What I found is if it'll start lifting this up, but then the thread slides through it, which it just did. Let me pull some of it back. See how it just lifts that up towards the top, but the thread's going through it? If I loosen it more, the thread goes through here without even moving the spring. Okay? And I'll take my thread back, and if I tighten this too much, it pulls this way up tight, and I'm really tugging on it to get the thread to go through. So that's not a 0. So I'm going to find my little spot again, just turning it left and right until it lifts this check spring up a little bit, but then the thread just goes right through. And that's a 0 out situation. And you see how easy it is to find that. You turn it a little bit to the left, it's going to have less tension at 0. Okay? Turn it a little bit to the right, it's going to have more tension. So each machine is a little different, and each tension unit's a little different. So I do this to 0 it out. Later, if I'm sewing, if I don't feel I have enough tension, I'll open this up and tighten it up a little bit. If I feel I have too much, I'll loosen it a little bit. But the rest of the assembly here is actually very easy. We're going to put on what's called the tension indicator flange. This is also called by people the numerated dial, or number dial. But I'm hoping that you can see, lined up with 0 on the front, there is a little button or post that sticks out in the back. And that's what interacts with the finger on the stop washer. Okay? So when you put this on, you want the 0 to be to the right of that finger. So we'll set it at about 1.5 or 2 being up and just push it on there. And then the last part of the assembly for this unit is the thumb nut. Okay, and it has a little set screw to keep it in place. So I'm just going to loosen the set screw a little so it doesn't stick out on the inside and damage the threads when I tighten it. Okay. Then I'm going to gently spin that on until it's up flush against the indicator. Now, I'm going to turn the indicator now, pushing it in to be sure it stays there. I'm going to turn it back towards the 0 and that little post to set it at 0. And then I'm going to do the last little bit of tightening. Now, I didn't really twist the indicator flange, just thread it on the nut to make it flush. And then I need to find where is my set screw and tighten it up there. And it looks like it's down here at the bottom, of course. So I'm just going to firm that up. Okay. Now we'll see how close to 0 I stayed. With the lever down, so I have tension, I'm going to pull on my thread again and see. Yeah, and this just starts lifting up and it gets about 1/2 or 2/3 of the way and the thread starts sliding through, which is what I want when I'm at 0. If I turn the tension to the right to, say, indicate number 2 tension, I should have noticeably more tension when I pull on this thread. And I do. So if I turn it to 3 or 4, which is a kind of a normal sewing position for most fabrics on most Singer machines, I should have quite a bit of tension. You know, it's much firmer to pull that thread through. And if I go up to 6, it's very hard to pull it through. If I go up to 8 or 9, it's so hard to pull through. It comes through, but it's almost like you're going to break the thread. If I go back to 0, look, it just barely lifts up the check spring and then the thread is sliding through. So I'm real happy with that. I'm going to take that as a zeroed out tension ready to go. Later during my sewing test, if I find the tension's a little too much or a little too light, you know, I like to sew it about a 3 or 4, and if I set it at a 4 and the thread tension's just too loose and the bobbin thread keeps pulling the needle thread through the fabric and looping or showing on the bottom, and I'll say, no, I need a little more tension. All I'm going to do is loosen that set screw, turn this knob off, take the indicator flange and move it a little to the right to make a little more tension, test it. When I think I have it correct, then I'll thread this thumb nut back on flush to the indicator and tighten the set screw to keep it there. tension has always been mysterious to people, but it's not hard to clean it, work on it, replace parts, and set the tension to how you like to sew. You know, maybe my idea of how much tension is at the number 4, maybe that's too much tension for you. You can adjust your tension unit lighter to have a less tension at the number 4. All right, you're getting the idea, right? Okay, so after all that work, I now have the tension release lever replaced and the tension working properly. Yay, hey. So now I have to put back you know, all these parts that I took off, and the next thing I'm going to do is put the needle bar and so forth back in there and set the height of the needle bar back to the factory setting. To start to put the needle bar back in the machine, I want to reassemble this part of the needle bar rocker bracket. If you remember, we took out the little hinge pin that connects that part of the bracket to the bracket that holds the needle bar driving arm, and so that we could hinge this out of the way and get down and work on the screw for the tension pin releasing lever. So we're just going to lift this bracket for the driving arm up and swing the needle bar rocker bracket underneath it, like so. And then if we line up the holes up here, we can drop this hinge pin back in there and just push it down firmly against the top of the driving arm bracket, just like that. Okay, and then I want to lower the needle bar a little bit, or not the needle bar yet, sorry, but the connecting link bracket right here, and I'll put this needle bar connecting link back into that hole so that we can slide the needle bar through there. And I think I'm just going to put a little oil, a drop of oil in there for now, just to help get it back in, and maybe a drop of oil right on the swivel here to get that going. And this should be well, not ambidextrous, but it shouldn't really matter which way it goes on this particular one. Take a look at it, and if you think one side looks better to be up, go ahead. But we want to, so I can get that over there, we want to plug that right into the connecting arm, like that. So now we're going to be able to push the needle bar back down through the top bushing, the connecting link, and the bottom bushing. Okay, and again, I'll just put a drop or two of oil on this needle bar and give it a light coating there, just so that I can slide it down in through all the bushings. It's a very, it's a tight tolerances on these. There we go. We got it through the connecting link clamp, and we'll get it down here like so. And you know what? Let me pull it out, because I want to be sure, those of you who've never seen this, on this type of Singer machine, on the needle bar, there's a couple of called timing marks. You can see these two grooves cut in to the needle bar right here. And the top groove or timing mark is for the needle height. The bottom one is for the needle point to hook point timing. So when I'm talking about these, I just want you to see that that's what I'm talking about, is those two grooves cut in there. Okay, I put this back in, get it through the connecting link, and back down in here. Now, when you move or take out the needle bar like this, you've got to reset the height, and you use that top timing mark to do it. And I'm just going to screw in this screw temporarily. This is the little screw that you fasten the needle clamp and the thread guide with. I'm just going to put that in there to have something to move the needle bar up and down with, and to help visually guide me, because besides setting the height, you have to line the needle bar up, you know, with the front of the machine, so that when you put the clamp on and you put the needle in, it's all lined up properly. And for me, just by putting that little screw in, and I'm sitting at the nose of the machine looking in, I want it to be, you know, dead on to my vision here, so that I'll know that the needle bar isn't twisted left or twisted right like that, that I'll have it in the proper place. And then to start setting the height on it, you want to turn the hand wheel until this connecting link and the clamp here gets to the lowest point. So I'll turn the hand wheel towards the front of the machine. You see it go down. Now I go past the low point, and you'll see it come back up. So I'll just wiggle the hand wheel back and forth and get it at the lowest point. Okay. Then I'm going to manipulate the needle bar down, in this case down, because what I want is that top groove, or the top timing mark, to be just barely below the bottom of this lower bushing. Okay, so you line it up parallel to that. That's how you set the proper height. And personally, I like to get it as close as I can to the bushing, but I still want to see a little silver sliver. I just want to barely see some silver needle bar up above that groove. So as close as I can, but still see a little hair's width of the needle bar. Because if I move it up so that the timing mark starts to go into the bushing, I'm not sure how far it went in. I might have barely went in. I might have went in a fourth of the way, a third of the way of that little timing mark. So if I get it as close as I can, but still able to see a little tiny bit of that needle bar, that's good for me. Then I'm just going to barely tighten up this clamping screw here a little bit, so that the needle bar doesn't fall on me. Okay. And then for my final setting here, I want to be sure that the needle positioning bracket, the LCR, left, center, right, is in the center position. And I want my stitch width to be at 0. I don't want it anywhere into the zigzag width mode. I want it all the way left into 0. And then I'll get right at the nose end here, and I will look at that little screw I put in and try and get it exactly facing this end of the machine. Now if you want to put the needle clamp and the thumb screw and everything on there to help you adjust it, that's great. Some people like to get at the front of the machine and look at that needle clamp to be sure it's sitting squarely. So whatever works for you, you're welcome to do. So for me, just that looks real good to me when I look from the end of the machine. Now I want to go up here and check. Yes, I'm still at a very good height. I see the top timing mark and just a little tiny bit of silver above it. So, keeping the needle bar and everything there, I want to tighten up this clamping screw so that it will hold the needle bar. This clamping screw is all that holds the needle bar in place, just this one screw. Tighten it up much better. Double check my height. Let's see, is my needle still at the low spot? Yep. So you know what happened, and this is why I double check. As I tighten the screw to the right, the needle bar actually came down a little bit. So to me the timing mark now is too far below the bottom of the bushing. Okay, so that's why we check, right? So I'm going to loosen it back up a little bit and see if I can get my height back where I wanted it. And this time I'll try holding the needle bar in place. And I'll get my screw pointed directly towards the end of the machine at me. I got my top timing mark very close to the bottom of that needle bar bushing. I'll snug it up again. Okay, this time it stayed there because I was holding it. So I've got the screw pointed at me towards the end, which should line up my needle bar, and I've got the timing mark just below the bushing, and I've got the needle clamp, and therefore now the needle bar at the lowest position. Very nice. Okay, so I'm really going to firm it up here now because I don't want the needle bar slipping in the future. Just a little tiny bit more is all it needed. Yep, nice and sturdy now. So that's reinstalling the needle bar and hooking back up the needle bar rocker bracket to everything. So I guess just for the heck of it, I'll put it in the zigzag width, and I'll turn the hand wheel and I'll just make sure that my needle bar kind of rocks back and forth in the zigzag. Yep, now it's coming towards me, now it's rocking away. Oh, I forgot, it's still in the, yeah, let me turn it to the regular zigzag mode. I think I had it in the blind hem. There we go, back, forward, towards me, back. And of course, if I'm sitting in front of the machine, it would be going left and right. So that's good. Now, everything I've done in this video here about replacing that tension pin releasing lever doesn't change anything with the timing. So I've reset the height of the needle. I don't have to reset the timing because I did not do anything to change the timing. So to finish up this labor of love with the tension pin releasing lever, what I need to do is to set the pressure bar system all back into the machine here. Okay, so I'll get those parts and we'll do that, and that will finish up. Okay, get my parts here ready, and we're going to put this pressure bar system back in. And to get started, I'm going to reinstall the pressure bar guide bracket. You may remember that this goes through the slot above the pressure bar lifter lever, so when that lever pushes up, it raises the guide bracket, and the pressure bar is clamped in that bracket, so that's what raises and lowers the pressure bar. So I'm just want to see if I can make a little more room here, and I'll lower that needle bar, and I'll try and guide this bracket in there and turn it so I can get it out through the slot. Get it up a little higher there, maybe. A little bit of a tight fit here. There we go. Then I'll let it come down and rest on that lifting lever. And I'll take my pressure bar. Again, I'll put a couple drops of oil on it just to give it a little film so it will slide through that guide bracket easily. And you see it's too tall to come in sideways, so you've got to drop it right through the top there into the guide bracket, through the guide bracket, and let it come down and go, come on bracket, let it go into the pressure bar bushing here. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and drop it all the way down and rest the bottom of the bar down here on the feed dog. Rest the bottom of it here on the feed dog, and that's just to make a little more room up here to get the other parts in. So let's see. Next we have to put the regulating bracket into the system here, and we have like a guide pin and the tension spring to do this. And we'll put the spring over the pin. I don't remember now if we put this regulating bracket with the little arm up. If we put it on there now, I can't remember if we can get it in there. Yeah, see, it's a little tall, and we don't want to bend it here at this point, right? So if the feed dog was out, we might be able to lower the bar a little bit more and then lower the pin another 1/4 inch and do it. But let's try it like this. Let's take this all back out and see if we get the spring in here, the regulating bracket. Maybe we can lower the pin through the very top of the machine, through the 2 holes of the regulating bracket, and get that pin into the spring right there. Now we should be able to lower that pin down like so. Okay, and then it's going to stay there. Now next is a tricky little part where this bracket has the little flip on the arm that has to be lined up to go in the keyhole here, so that that bracket can be guided up and down. Oh, there we go. So what I did was slide this bracket up so the top bar is off of the guide pin. Then I can lean it out a little bit, and I can angle this so that it goes in that slot. Then I'll drop that top arm back on the pin there. Okay. And then this bracket goes up at the top, if you remember that. Let's see if I can start the screw to keep this all here a little bit. And then I'll tilt the machine and remind you what that looks like. If you've been following the video and you saw the part to take it off, you'll remember it. Okay, let's get this up here now and see if I can tilt this. So the little fork at the end of this bracket is made to go around the screw that holds in the thread take-up lever. And that's just to help line it up and keep it flush here. So you've got to get the fork around that screw. And we'll lower this down. And then, now because I have the pressure bar lowered, this pin is lowered. But the pin has to go up into this hollow screw up here. So now we can just lift the pressure bar and guide that pin up into that hollow screw, and just finger tighten it for now to get it up there. Okay, so it's pretty much back together there, right? Okay, then let's put the dial back on. Now the dial is numerated from 8 to D for darning, and that lines up the little click stops to go on that curve part that sticks through, and that's what helps it click, 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 click for the different settings. So if you put this dial onto the bracket to screw it in, if you put the D facing up, it should line this finger into the correct spot, the big roomy spot down here that is made to not put any pressure on the pressure bar for darning. Okay, let's get the D up there. Here's the screw hole, here's the screw. We'll lift the pressure bar up into the area a little bit and wiggle around until we find that screw hole. I've got to stand up and look down on it here. There we go. So remember, with the D up at the top here, we'll tighten this mounting screw up. And that should get the dial back on there in the right position. And that is that's also a hinge screw, so you tighten it all the way, but you'll still be able to turn this dial. Okay? Now I'm just going to lift the pressure bar to put some tension on the spring, and then try that dial and see if it, yeah. So it's in the position as I turn it, 1, 2, 3, like that. It puts more pressure on the spring. You might be able to see this pin and spring going up and down as I turn the dial. So I know I've got the dial back on that little finger. in the back of it. So I'm just going to temporarily eyeball the presser bar with the screw for the thumb screw facing me, and lift up the presser bar so just the very top of the bar comes through the guide bracket, and that's just an approximate setting. And I'll just snug it up a little bit, just barely. Yeah, that's a little bit too tight, as a matter of fact. Gonna leave play in there. There we go. Okay. So to set the height of this now, the space from the bottom of any of the presser feet, in this case the multi-purpose foot or zigzag foot, from the bottom of it to the top of the needle plate is 0.290 to 0.300 inches, okay, or 7.49 millimeter. And I'm just going to raise up my needle bar a little bit, and I want to put the needle plate back on the machine. And you can use the straight stitch needle plate with the single little hole in it, or you can use this multi-purpose needle plate. We just want to be sure that it gets set flat and even as we adjust this height. Then I'll raise up my presser bar lifter, and let's see, am I stuck? Oh, I slipped out of there. Let me see if I can turn this back to darn so there's not much pressure on here. However you want to do it, I want to get this presser foot back onto the presser bar. So where's my presser foot? Here we go. This is the presser foot thumb screw, and I'm just get it started back on there a little bit. There we go. I'm going to slip on my presser foot back on there. And get it properly installed on the flat side here. Come on, you. There we go. Tighten that up nice and snug. There. So we're doing pretty good here. Okay. Now this is kind of a combination procedure, because besides setting the height, you have to line up the presser bar so that the presser foot is in perfect alignment with the feed dog. If the presser foot is twisted a little bit left or right, your fabric is going to pull that way as it's feeding through. It'll pull off to the left or it'll pull off to the right. So besides the height, you need to line it up. Some people like to get in the front and look at the toes of the presser foot as they line up for the slots for the feed dog. Some people do it from the end and just line up the edge of the presser foot with the edge of the slot. Okay? But whatever you like to do. So let me get a couple tools here that I use to gauge the height of this, and we'll set the height. Okay. All right. Now, as I mentioned before, the height of the presser foot above the needle plate is 0.290 to 0.300 inches, in that range. Okay, and I usually set it about the 2.95 or 0.295 inches. So the range is 0.290 to 0.300 inches, and I usually set it about the 0.295. The 0.295 inches is 7.49 millimeters. Now, a U.S. quarter dollar is 1.75 millimeter thick. So 4 of them are 7 millimeters thick. Okay, so I'm going to lift up my lever, lift up my presser bar, and get the 4 quarters underneath the presser foot. Like so. So that gets me to 7.00 millimeters, and I only need about a 0.49 or 0.50 to be in the range. Now, if you don't have a tool like this, a feeler gauge, just use your 4 quarters and you're going to be awfully close. And I'll show you how close you're going to be if you don't have this. This is a 0.019 inch or 0.48 millimeter. And this is a 0.020 inch or 0.50 millimeter. So I'm going to go a little bit past the 0.295 inch and I'll use this. But look at the thickness of that. I don't even know if it's hard to see how thick a half millimeter is. It's not very thick, right? So if you don't have one of these, just use the 4 quarters and you're going to be very, very close to the factory height. I'm going to use it since I got one. So I'm going to lift up that presser foot against the spring and I'm going to put that. So now my presser foot with the lever raised, right, is 7.5 millimeters. Right there. And that's very good for a setting. And if you have this up all the way, push this bracket and pull it down a little bit until it hits the stop. See, here's down and there's up. You'll feel it kind of click in. Maybe I turn this a little bit more towards you. You'll feel it kind of click in there. Right there. So you see, when I said originally to snug up the screw a little bit with just the top of the presser bar sticking out, that's all it sticks out at the factory height. So I've got my height now. I want to line up the presser foot with the feed dog slots and get those nice, get that nice and lined up. And then all I have to do is tighten that clamping screw and I'll be done setting the height. There we go. So let's take a look at the functionality of it now. I can go ahead and remove my feeler gauge. I can slide out my 4 quarters very easily, and I can lower my foot. But you know what? The foot, even all the way down, doesn't look like it's resting completely. Look, of course I don't have any pressure, so let me put some pressure on that spring. But it looks just a little bit loose down here. And I'm going to tell you the mistake that I made, because it's common and I don't want you to make it. So let me lift this back up. Remember when I said, let me loosen this, get back kind of to the starting point there. Let me turn my dial back to darn, so there's as little as pressure as possible. This is kind of where we started before we put our quarters underneath. But what you need to do is turn the hand wheel and watch the cycle of the feed dog, and you want the feed dog to be at the low point. You want it to be below the top of the needle plate, and I didn't do that. I had it up where my feed dog was sticking up out of the needle plate, so it really was not an accurate height. So let me turn that feed dog so that the feed dog is well below the top of the needle plate. Now I'm going to stick my 4/4 under there. And it's important too that your needle plate sit just perfectly how it's supposed to in the machine. Then I'll lift that up and get my 4/4 back under there. And then I'll lift it again and get my my 0.50 millimeter feeler gauge under there for the last amount of the factory height. Whoop, put it a little too far, it went right through the back. There we go, got my 4/4 and my feeler gauge under there, right under the middle of the presser foot. Now we're talking, huh? Then I'm going to just look at it from this angle. I like to line it up like this and get these, what I call the toes, the tip, the side of the presser bar, and from here I can see the openings for the feed dog in the needle plate, the slots right there, and I line up those toes with those two slots. So my presser foot isn't twisted left or right. It's lined right up with the feed dog then. Okay, whoop. Looks great. Okay. Then I'm going to just push on that a little bit to make sure it's in the click location. It's not up above, that it's down where it just clicks into the stop like when you normally raise it. And I can see now just there's a little tiny bit less of the presser bar sticking up. I've got this at the right height here now. So I get this ready to tighten, then I'll just hold it down while I tighten it up. Alright, now I can pull out my feeler gauge. I can pull out my 4/4 very easily because I have this tightened down now, and I can raise and lower the presser foot, and it's very good. It's set at the factory height. Now, with all the quarters and the feeler gauge out of there, if I want, I can stand up and look straight down the nose and see, does the edge of this presser foot line up with the opening slot of the feed dog. And I can also turn it back towards me and make sure that my presser foot from the front angle lines up with the slots on the feed dog, on the opening of the needle plate for the feed dog. Test it up, test it down. Then I go ahead and put some pressure back on there, like 4 or 5. Yep. Very good. So everything is back now. So that long drawn out procedure was all to replace a bent and twisted tension pin releasing lever behind everything, so that my tension unit for the needle thread will work properly now. See it? Release tension, put tension, release, put. Ta-da! Okay, that was a long one, huh? Alright, thanks for tuning in on replacing that tension pin releasing lever. May not have seen anything like that before. That's what I try and do, give you some adjusting and repair videos maybe you haven't seen in the past. Come back and see me. Okay? Take care.